We're talking today with Mr. Richard Hawley of Wyoming, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Hawley, can you get us started by telling us a little bit about your own background? To start with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Kalkaska, Michigan, and lived with my grandparents.
Okay, and what year were you born?
32.
All right. Now, you're living with your grandparents. Were they working at that time, or?
No, they were farmers.
Mm-hmm.
They had a store,
Okay.
a small grocery store.
Okay. And was that in town in Kalkaska, or was it
No,
outside of
it was
town?
North,
All
5
right.
miles north.
Okay.
Leedsville, actually.
Okay. Now, did you stay there all the time you were growing up, or did you move around?
No, well, I stayed there for about 5 years, and then I went to live with my mother in Traverse City.
And did you go to school in Traverse City?
Yes.
Okay. And how long did you stay in school?
We went from there to Kalamazoo,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to Kalamazoo schools until I was 11th grade.
Okay.
11th grade.
And then why did you leave school at that point?
I quit and signed up for the Air Force.
All right. Now, had the Korean War started by that time?
Not quite.
Not quite. So when did you enlist in the Air Force then? What year?
1950
Okay. But early in the
or
year?
51.
Okay. Well, the Korean War starts in 1950.
50, yeah, it was
Okay.
50.
All right. Now, why did you decide to join the Air Force?
I picked it over the Army.
Okay.
Well, it was part of the Army when I joined.
Mhm.
It was the U.S. Army Air Corps,
Right.
yeah. And then they made it Air Force.
Right. A separate branch. Yes. Now, why did you decide to enlist in the armed forces, though?
Well, there was a draft at that time, and either that or you get drafted, one or the other.
Okay.
So I decided to enlist.
All right. And then, what attracted you to the Air Force or the Air Corps in particular?
I just liked the Air Force.
Okay. Now, when you were a little younger, World War II had been going on. Had you paid much attention to that while it was happening?
Oh yeah, Roosevelt was in office. Yeah, we paid close attention
And how did you get your information about it?
on the radio
Mm-hmm.
every night.
Okay. And then, did you know a lot of people who had been in the service and had been in World War II?
Oh yes, yeah. My family, my uncles. In fact, I have one uncle who was in the Battle of the Bulge. He had some stories.
All right. Now, at the time that you enlisted, were you thinking that you might get yourself into a war, or did you just figure this would be a good next step?
I just thought it would be a good step.
Okay. All right. Now, once you do enlist, where do they send you for basic training?
San Antonio, Texas.
All right. So Lackland Field or one of the other.
Lackland.
Yeah. All right. And what did your training consist of at that point?
Oh, they had 12 weeks of different things, shooting and, marching.
Did you have to learn to follow orders and
Oh, yeah.
make your bed and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, how well did you adjust to all of that? How easy was it for you to become a soldier?
Not bad.
Were there some guys around you who had trouble with it? Okay. What kinds of problems would they have?
Well, they talked back to the first sergeant. Get in trouble for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sleep late. Get in trouble for that. I did once, and they dumped me out of bed. Put the bed on top of me. I cured that.
All right. Now, did you get a lot of physical conditioning? A lot of marching and running and
Oh, yes.
that kind of thing? Okay.
We went on 5-mile hikes.
And what time of year was it when you were down there?
January, February.
All right. So now down in San Antonio, that might be good weather for San Antonio. Not too hot.
Yeah, it was rainy and muddy.
Mhm.
And, hot in the afternoon, cold at night.
Okay. Now, during the time when you were in basic training, did you take tests or get sorted out in terms of what kind of assignment you would get?
Oh, yes.
All right. And what did you wind up being assigned to?
I went to engineering drafting to begin with, but then I ended up going to aircraft welding later on. That's what I ended up doing.
Okay. And what did you get that training at Lackland or somewhere else?
No, I was at Chinook Field,
Okay, that's in Illinois.
Illinois.
All right. So you had about 12 weeks down at Lackland then for basic,
Yes.
and they move you up to Chanute, and then how long are you?
No, I went to Selfridge.
Okay, go to Selfridge in Michigan first.
Yeah.
All right. And what were you doing up at Selfridge? Was that the drafting
Working
school?
in maintenance
Okay.
as a welder.
All right. And what kind, were you working on all kinds of aircraft or equipment, or what were you working on?
Heavy equipment, whatever, water pipes, anything that needed welding.
Okay. So you do work around the base and not just
Yeah.
with aircraft. All right. About how long do you think you spent up at Selfridge?
I was there probably 6 months.
Okay. And while you were based up there, did you get a chance to go home and visit at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. We went home a lot because that wasn't very far from Kalamazoo. That's where I started out.
Right. And at that stage, you're not in basic training anymore, so
No.
you can go off base and that,
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
thing. Now, where were you when the Korean War actually broke out?
Selfridge.
Okay, you were at Selfridge at that time.
Yeah.
Now, what was the response on the base when the news came that we were in a war?
Well, everybody was fired up, you know. And of course, they got more fired up when Truman fired McCarthy.
That
They
was,
were devastated.
okay. That was a little while later. Now, were you still in the States when that happened too?
No,
Okay.
I was on my way to Korea.
All right. So you're at Selfridge, and that's when the war starts. Now, from there, did you go to Chanute in Illinois?
No, I come back from overseas to Chanute.
Oh, okay. So Chanute's on the way
I
out.
went to Chanute to learn welding.
Okay. We're just trying to put the sequence of events in order.
Yeah. Well, I went temporary to learn
Right.
to go to the welding school.
Okay. Well, how long did you actually spend in the welding school?
That welding school was seemed like 19 weeks,
Okay.
something like that.
All right. So you were trained there, and then you're assigned to Selfridge. Okay. And then at what point did they send you overseas?
I volunteered. Yeah, they come down with a thing that they need volunteers for the Far East, and I signed up.
Okay. And
I thought I'd get Japan, but I ended up in Korea.
all right. Once you volunteered for that, how quickly did they move you out?
Oh, right away. Yeah. They were hurting for people in Korea.
Okay. And then how did you get out to Korea?
Flew. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, took a boat to Japan.
Okay.
And then flew to Korea.
All right. What kind of ship did they have you on going out to Japan?
Horrible ship. In fact, it sunk 2 trips later.
What kind of boat was it? Was it just an old
Troop carrier.
It was a troop carrier. Okay. And what was the voyage like? What do you?
Horrible. They went right between 2 typhoons.
Okay.
It was rough.
When you're in the middle of it, when you're going through that kind of rough weather, were you worried the ship was going to sink, or?
Oh, yeah, everybody was.
Right. And how were the crew behaving during all of that?
Well, you didn't see them because you were locked down.
Okay. So you were locked in the hold of the ship then, and the ship
Yeah,
was bouncing
yeah,
all over the
sh-
place?
Shut everything down.
And about what proportion of the guys do you think got sick during all that?
I think I seen one. I was up on by the rail, and this one master sergeant was sick. Some kid come up and said, "Sick, Sarge?" He wasn't sick a bit. And the sergeant said, "Get out of here."
Right. About how long did the trip take on the boat?
9 days.
Okay. So relatively quick, even with the typhoons on the whole.
Oh yeah.
All right. And then they land you in Japan first?
Yokohama.
Yokohama. And did you actually get off the ship there, or?
Yeah, we got up at Yokohama. But then they put you on a train to go to Dakota, a Shia Air
Mhm.
Force Base.
All right. And,
And that's where I flew to Korea from.
okay. So you don't get time really based in Japan first. You're going straight to Korea.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
I had a little time.
All right. And then where in Korea were you based?
Daegu,
Okay.
K2.
All right. And can you describe that base and that area a little bit? What did it look like?
Rough. Well, the base wasn't a concrete runway, it was pierced steel planking. That was a combat airstrip.
Mm-hmm.
And,
And what kind of planes flew out of there?
fighter bombers flew missions every day,
Okay.
twice a
And
day.
right. And then what specific model of plane were they? Do you remember that?
F-84.
Okay.
That was an early jet.
A very early jet. All right. And did you work on the aircraft themselves?
Sometimes, but most of the time I worked on the runway and base maintenance.
Okay. What kind of work did you have to do on those runways, and how often did you do it?
Well, that planking would peel up, and you had to go out there with a crowbar and welder and weld it all down. I did that one time when the planes couldn't come in, but they had them fly over our head while we were welding. So every time you looked up, you were looking at a C-47 or two-engine plane.
And were they waiting for you to finish the work so they could land?
Oh, well, that was just those big planes.
Mm-hmm.
But the jets, they had to have it done. When they come home, they couldn't land on them.
Right. Now, what would do the damage to the runways?
I think it was the jet themselves, they peeled it up.
All right, so just the pressure of the weight of the plane
Yeah.
hitting on there, the metal will bend, or
Yeah, that's what it did, it rolled.
all right. Now, were you in an area that ever came under enemy fire or attack?
Well, every night, yeah, every night they attacked the base.
And what were the?
Guerrillas.
And can you explain a little bit what would happen then?
We didn't hear nothing about it, we'd be sleeping, but the
Mhm.
Korean guards would fight them off.
And could you hear the gunfire at
Oh,
night?
yeah. One night I heard they had an anti-aircraft unit there, and they had machine guns, and they were going at it, trying to get some guy. They never did get him, but they caught him, but they didn't hit him or nothing.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever get attacked by any enemy aircraft?
Oh yeah. We had a guy come about twice a week. He called Bed Check Charlie. He come in a light plane, threw hand grenades, just to torment, you know.
All right. Did anybody ever try to do anything about him or chase him
They
off?
couldn't catch him. He was in a light plane.
Mm-hmm.
Jets just
Yeah.
too big.
No. And otherwise, you'd need either another light plane or a night fighter or something, and
Yeah,
that's not what you were doing there.
no.
Okay. Were you close enough for the enemy to fire artillery at you or mortars or things like that?
No.
No. So
We
you
were
just
about 150 miles from the front line.
okay. So you're a good ways away. But there just were some enemy guerrillas or somebody
Guerrillas, yeah.
operating out there who could make trouble.
Well, you never know which was which. You know?
Mhm. All right. What kind of living conditions did you have at Teku or at K2?
Lived in tents.
Mm-hmm.
Very cold, wet.
Yeah. What could you do to keep warm and keep dry there?
Not much. Yeah. Well, they had oil heaters. You could go inside and warm up.
Mhm.
Outside, it was bitter.
All right. And how many men would they put in a tent?
About 8 beds and
And how do they feed you out there?
mess hall.
Okay.
We had a mess sergeant was a nephew of the Secretary of the Army, and he was a good man. He didn't have to be there. He could have gone home anytime. Yeah, he did. He put out a good meal.
Okay. So he had the right connections or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you have a lot of Koreans working with you on the base?
Oh yes, yes.
And what kinds of things did they do?
Well, helpers, you know. I had one kid that worked with me. I taught him how to weld, and he became a better welder than me. The Koreans, you know. But then he had to go to the Army. I got another kid in that wasn't that good.
Mhm.
He
Now-
did all right.
Okay. Now, did these kids speak English? Were they able to talk to you? Or?
Broken. I could speak a little bit of Japanese and Korean,
Mhm. And,
Chinese.
and did you just pick that up while you were there?
Yeah. Just I could carry on a fluent conversation, but bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I knew all the dirty words.
Yeah, so you had the important jargon then. All right.
Well, that's the only way you get their attention, you know.
Okay. Now, what other kinds of jobs would Koreans do on the base?
They usually help load trucks. And, they worked around on the streets, around the base, keep the base up.
Okay. And did you have Korean soldiers guarding the base as well?
Yes.
And did you see very much of them, or did they just keep to themselves?
We used to see them once in a while. They kept pretty much themselves.
Okay. Now, about how many aircraft do you think were based at your air base?
Yeah. Probably 300-400.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, then, at that size facility, were they all different kinds of aircraft?
Mostly jets. Yeah.
Okay.
A few cargo, but mostly of them were jets.
Okay. And what impression did you have of the jet aircraft? I mean, in terms of what their quality was?
I thought they were good, yeah.
Mhm.
The only thing they didn't have their wings swept back. That was all they wanted for Christmas. Their wings swept back.
Why would that make a difference to them?
Well, because the MiG had it, and they were much faster. You know. I don't know what's the deal, but they're always faster with the
Okay.
wings back.
Now, did you talk much at all to the pilots? Did you have a good idea of what they were
Yeah.
doing?
Oh yeah, I used to do a lot of work for the officers' mess. I talked to a lot of them.
And what were they telling you about the missions or their experiences out there?
Oh, I had one guy that was a real nut. And, he flew, he couldn't close up a tunnel. And he was a fighter bomber. He flew through the tunnel, dropped his bomb, and flew out the other side. And it was inches.
Yeah.
But he did it. Yeah. He laughed about it later.
Okay. Now, did they lose a lot of aircraft?
Oh yeah, we used to lose a couple a day.
Okay. And would those be from enemy action or accidents or?
Usually dogfight.
Mhm. And did they report back on, their own fighting or what planes they were shooting down or things like that?
Well, their partners would report it, so they knew. They knew what planes were out and what ones came back.
Right. But did they talk at all about shooting down enemy planes?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Some of them had 30, 40 MiGs on their plane. They got a sticker every time they shot one down.
Now, did they talk at all about who they thought were actually flying those planes? I mean, were those Soviet pilots or Chinese or Korean or?
I think they were some of them Chinese. They didn't think the North Koreans were that good.
But did they ever think that there were any Russian pilots?
No, not that I heard of.
Okay. All right. Now, while you were based there, did you get a chance to go off the base at all?
Oh yeah.
And where would you go when you?
Daegu, and we got to go R&R to Japan every 6 weeks. You get a couple days R&R. You
Okay.
go to Japan.
Tell me a little bit about Daegu first. That's a relatively large city for Korea at the time. What was it like then?
It was, it was for that type of a country. It was all right, but nothing compared to any city in the United States.
Mhm.
But it was a pretty good sized city.
Okay. In general, how did the Korean people seem to treat the American servicemen around there?
Very good. Yeah. I had a lot of friends. Well, there was some that, you know, you could pick them out.
I mean, there were some you thought that just didn't like you or supported the communists, or
Yeah, yeah. Well, I had one hit me with a Jeep,
okay.
hit me against the building. And that guy was obviously North Korean.
So that was just in the town that he did that.
No, right at the motor pool when I went to pick up my truck.
All right. Well, what happened?
He come around, I was walking, he run into me, pinned me against the building.
Okay. And then what happened?
And he jumped out and left it running. Sergeant come out and hit him in the mouth, got in and backed it off.
And were you hurt, or you...
Oh yeah, I was sick for a week. My legs were.
Mm-hmm.
I had one leg shoved through the wall.
And what kind of wall was it?
Stucco.
Okay, so it did give way. It wasn't a solid brick wall anyway.
Oh no, it wasn't brick.
Still.
They didn't have no brick there, I don't think.
All right. Now, when you got a chance to go over to Japan, what would you do when you went there?
Usually go to bars, you know, the usual.
Now, did they have rules for what you could do and couldn't do when you went on leave, or they just let you go?
They let you go.
All right.
Unless the SPs or the NPs picked you up, you were all right.
Okay. Now, what sort of size unit or outfit were you working with? Like, how many men did you work with on a regular basis?
Oh, you mean in my squadron?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably 200.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And who were you reporting to, or who was your supervisor or your chief?
The chief was Captain Whitaker.
And what impression did you have of him?
Nice man. Yeah. We had one before him, Major Stokes, but he got in an argument with the base commander and he got broke down to captain. They removed him from being head of the squadron. But he was a nice man.
Okay. Now, these officers you had, as far as you can tell, were those sort of career officers or guys?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So they weren't just guys in here like you were just for the war.
Well, a couple of them, but, you know.
Mm-hmm. And how would you characterize the pilots? What kind of people were they? Aside from the one really crazy guy.
Hard drinking.
Mm-hmm.
They used to drink all night. They put them in the fighter in the morning and drunk. And they'd fly like crazy. I don't know how they do it.
I don't know either. but it might be part of what gets them going to go out there in the first place. I don't know. All right. About how long did you spend in Korea?
A year.
Okay. And during that time, are there sort of specific events or things that happened to you that really sort of stand out in your memory or you tend to think about?
Other than getting hit by that Jeep,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and working on the runway, you know,
Mm-hmm.
under those conditions. But other than that, it was nothing fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But see, we had Korean guards took care of all that.
Yeah. I mean, so aside from an occasional crazy guy in the Jeep, it wasn't too dangerous most of the time.
Not really, but you never knew who you were dealing with, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, did any of the men from the base, I mean, would they have problems off base? Was there any problem with crime or things like that?
Yeah.
What kinds of things would happen?
All kinds of things. Just one guy sold his truck 3 different times. Yeah, like it was from North Carolina, hillbilly. They couldn't do nothing with him. Well, he was on flying status. He got kicked off that because he was shooting at his own planes. That's the kind of guy he was.
All right. Now, while you were there, what kind of news did you have or information did you have about what was going on in the war? Did you know much what was going on?
Yeah, because you used to have the USAPI come on the radio all night. So you got all pretty good news.
You said USAFI?
Yeah, it used to be a United States Armed Forces network.
Okay. Now, did the Koreans have an equivalent of a Tokyo Rose or something like that? Did you have a?
Not that I know of.
So you didn't get to listen to that for that side of things.
No.
Okay. Did you have much of an understanding of why you were in Korea in the first place?
Well, yeah, I guess I did.
What did you think the war was for at that point?
Well, because they were trying to kill the South,
Mm-hmm.
and they needed help.
Mm-hmm. And did you think of it as part of stopping communism or just protecting the country?
Well, just to protect that country, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to stop communism with a little war like that.
All right. Now, over the course of the year that you're there, did a lot of men rotate out of the unit before you left? Were the people coming?
Rotated it after a year.
Mm-hmm.
You had to rotate you back
Mm-hmm.
because you got so many points per month.
Right. But it meant the people you're working with change over the course of that year.
Yeah.
Now, how well did that work? Was it a good system in terms of getting guys trained and oriented?
Not really.
Okay, why not?
Well, because the trained guys all go home.
Mm-hmm.
They're all there a long time, and leave all new guys, so nobody knew what was going on.
So sometimes too many experienced guys would leave at the same time?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they'd been there well over a year, and they were screaming they wanted to go home.
Okay.
Yeah, they had to have a replacement before they could go home.
Right. And so maybe early on they didn't have a lot of replacements, and so you had a lot of guys staying longer.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then-
I don't know. Early on, they probably didn't have too many volunteers
Yeah.
or whatever.
And then, yeah, and they had to build the bases and so forth once the front stabilized a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's one of those things where they always argue about whether it's better to rotate men in and out individually or send in whole units or whatever. And the claim is that the old guys teach the new guys how to do the job, and then they become the old guys and teach the new guys.
That's the way it worked. Yeah.
Okay.
They were rotating them individual.
So when you got there, for initially at the base, what kind of reception did you get?
Good.
Okay.
Very good.
And were there people who showed you, okay, here's what we're doing?
Certainly.
Okay. And then did you do that later on when you were?
Yeah, I took their place.
Mm-hmm.
They went home.
Okay. So it at least functioned then as a system.
Yeah, it functioned well.
Okay. Now, as you got closer to the end of that year, were you kind of counting down the days, or?
Oh, of course. Everybody was.
All right. And then once your tour out there ends, how do they get you back home?
Usually by boat.
Was it a better trip going back than it was going over?
Yeah, I would say so.
Was the ship any better or just the weather?
It's a better ship.
Okay. Now, once you got back home, did you still have time left to serve?
Oh yeah, we still had another year or two.
Okay. Now, where did they send you to Chanute at that point?
Yeah, then I went to Chinook.
Okay. And what were your duties there?
I was in the maintenance of the welding school.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a shop, you know.
Okay. If you kind of look at the different sorts of work that you did, was there a particular kind of work that you thought was maybe more challenging or more interesting than the rest of it? Was fixing the runways the hardest thing to do, or something else?
Fixing the runways would come right up close.
Okay.
Pipe welding was hard.
Okay. Now, did you just stay then for that initial term of your enlistment and leave, or did you?
Well,
Re-up.
Eisenhower got to be president, and they were cutting all the military.
Mm-hmm.
So I got out about 3 months early.
All right.
I didn't have to serve the full 4 years.
Okay. And did you think that was a good thing? Were you ready to leave?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
everybody was ready to leave.
All right. Now, once you got discharged, then what did you do when you got home?
I can't remember. Let's see what I did.
What kind of work did you go into?
I was putting up TV antennas for a long time. And then I went welding, started welding. And I stuck with that.
Okay. And were you doing this in construction or in machine shops, or what kind of welding, or where?
Oh, all over, you know. It was like a mobile welder.
Okay. All right. Now, if you think back to that time that you spent in the Air Force, so what kind of effect do you think that had on you?
I think it was good. Because I was green, I didn't know nothing when I went in. I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
No education, no trade or nothing. And I got a trade out of it.
Do you think you viewed the world a little bit differently because you've been over an ocean and,
Yeah.
and someplace else?
Yeah, it's totally different when you went over and when you come back. You viewed everything different.
All right. Do you think it would be a good thing to have some kind of national service in this country where everybody went in the military for a couple of years or did something like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would solve a lot of problems.
All right. Now, since we've got some family in attendance, are there any individual stories he's told here that we've left out that ought to go in the record? Or have we covered things pretty well?
Yeah, what else is there to say?
Yeah, he didn't talk a lot about it, you know.
All right.
So, but we heard this mainly.
Okay.
This trip back though from California, he said the train was didn't you take a train or something from California?
Boy, that was horrible.
Yeah, well,
He talked about that.
Well, I come back to San Francisco and caught a train back. I could have flew, but I chose a train. I got to Bakersfield, and all the earthquakes were in there then. All the tracks were torn up.
okay.
So they put us on a Greyhound with air.
Mm-hmm.
But I sat in the back seat and that air blew over my head. I didn't even feel it. We went across the Mojave Desert in that thing. I about fried. And then we got back on this side. Well, then they put us back on a train into Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a long trip. Of course, you know, traveling from there to here took a month. By the time you did everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the boat trip and everything else. 30 days.
Yep.
So when you were traveling from California back to the Midwest, did you ever like go through parts of the country where you say, oh, this is a nice area, I'd like to maybe
Wyoming.
stay here and live in?
Cheyenne, Wyoming looked very nice.
Well, you did wind up in Wyoming. I just guessed the wrong one.
Yeah. No, Wyoming is a state.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
Yep. Well, I think if we've sort of covered the story here, then I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.